and thank you so much for joining me for some Saturday night crafting. I've got a really awesome fun tutorial for you that is going to involve some of your decorative papers or backgrounds that you've made that you've not used, as well as your scraps. So this is going to be great for any of those chunks of scraps that you got that you can trim down and cut down into strips. Or if you're like me and you keep your strips to the side, then this is perfect for using up those as well. I'm going to show you a few different projects on how we can put these together into some really gorgeous looking cards. So I hope you join me and stay with me for the whole entire tutorial. It's a bit of a long one. We've got about 15 minutes of me yabbering away and sharing with you how to make these cards. Now, if you enjoy my content and enjoy these videos and these kinds of tutorials, please make sure that you like, share, subscribe, comment down below. All those things are what keeps this channel going and keeps it free. So if you don't mind doing that, that means the world to me, and it really, really helps me to keep my channel going and keep me doing this full time. Now, the first thing I wanted to do before I dive into my new packs of these papers, because if you watched my video last week, you saw that I have joined the Paper Rose design team, and I have brand new packs of my favorite ever paper pads, which are these two here, the Rainbow Twirl series. But I'm going to try and use up the last few bits of those papers before I move on. Now, what I wanted to do tonight was to use my paper pads up. And this is a great project for that. So I'm going to use these 6x6 papers. If you've got scraps of papers lying around, they will work as well, as long as your dies or your dimensions work for the size of scraps that you've got. So I'm going to share with you first using dies, and then I'm going to share with you how you can do it without dies. And this first one here is how we're going to create a frame for our cute little use of our scraps. So I've got two different kinds of dies here. I've got layering dies, and then I've also got frame dies. So the layering dies are fantastic because you can obviously create your own frame. Just take two of them that are slightly different sizes and then layer them together. Use a little bit of low tack tape. This is mint tape from scrapbookdotcom. And then you can run it through your die cutting machine, and then you get this sort of frame. These circle dies are the Hero Arts Infinity dies, so you get quite a few in the set, and you can have a really nice thin frame, or you can skip a layer and have a thicker frame like I've done here. These ones are actual frame dies, so all you get is just the frame and obviously the inside square, and they are from cardmakingtechniques.com. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but I keep these old peanut butter jars on my desk. I have one for sort of neutral dark colors, and then I have one for everything else. I don't throw away any of my strips. So a lot of people chuck these bits in the bin because you get a lot of them left over. I save them all and they go into these jars, and then I do projects with them. So I do have a few videos on my channel. I'll try and link the playlist down below for you and at the end of the video, so you can go and check them out if you want some more ideas on what to do with your scraps. But I love saving them because they always come in handy for a fun project. Now, this one I originally was going to keep the frame the same color, but I decided actually I wanted to do my strips white, and I wanted to have a frame that kind of matched those strips to kind of give it that continuity, allow it to flow and blend a little bit more smoothly. So I've got my strips ready to go, tuck that to the side. I decided I wanted to kind of add a little bit more color to the background. On my other card I'm using foil, so that's kind of the highlight. And for this one I decided to use my new lisahortoncrafts paper, and you get a lot of sheets in this paper pack, a lot, and it's got a white core, so when you emboss it you can then kind of distress the top and reveal the white underneath, which I love. But in this case I just love these mermaid colors so much, and they match my beautiful rainbow papers so well that I decided I would use them as sort of my backing. Now, as I'm doing the video, you kind of see my process and what I go through, because I do change my mind a few different times. But what I'm doing here is cutting myself a card base, tuck my scraps into that strip jar, and any bigger scraps go into the back of my paper pads. And that's how I do it with all my decorative papers as well as my colored cardstock. And then that way I can keep them all together, and when I need a scrap of that color, I know exactly where I've got one, and it's in the back of the paper pack. I do change my mind in a minute about the color of my card base, but you'll see that coming up in a second. Now, all I'm doing here is gluing my strips down. And I'm grabbing random sizes. I don't want the same thickness to go anywhere near the thickness that was before it, so I'm kind of alternating between a skinnier one and a thicker one, and then I'm alternating the space between them as well to kind of reveal that paper below it. Now, when you're done applying all your strips, you can go ahead and cut them out with scissors, or you could take that die, line it back over the top, and run it through your die cut machine. Now, be warned, because this is where I had a bit of an oopsie. I took the low tack tape that I'd used on a few projects and put it on, so it was actually a bit more tacky than normal, and then I ran it through quite a pressured die cut sandwich just to make sure it cut through all those layers, and sadly the tape stuck a little bit to it, and I kind of had a little bit of tearing of my paper, which is not normal with this tape, and I also had indentation. So it might be worth, if you're going to die cut it, to then put the die straight on top and just run it through, and don't worry about having the washi tape hold it in place or the low tack tape. This is where I changed my mind. I felt like it was too much blue, so I decided to cut myself a background in holographic card and then cut off the extra bit of card and make it a slightly smaller layer to go on the top. Now, in retrospect, I should have die cut my sentiment out of that holographic card before I stuck it down, because it's behind everything and you don't see it. And I decided I wanted to put this gorgeous hello on the top, so I grabbed another piece of scrap holographic, but I could have cut it straight out the middle of that holographic card that was my backing layer, and that would have saved cardstock big time. So I glued some layers together to white underneath my holographic, and there is a backing part to this die so you can have like a shadow for it, but I wanted to just use it as it was. I have these in my stash. I think I got them either from Shein or AliExpress ages ago, and they are holographic, sort of little flat back holeless sequins. If you've watched me for a while, you know I'm a fan of cheap tools, and this is my cheap pickup tool. It is a chopstick with a bit of blue tack on the end, and this thing has been going for over 2 years, and before that I had one that lasted me 3 years, and you literally just change the tiny bit of blue tack on the end and it picks things up beautifully, and I use my pokey tool just to kind of pull them off of the blue tack. But it is so cheap and so efficient, it works a dream, and I have 3 of these that just sit on my desk ready for when I need to attach something like these little gems. So here's the first card, all finished and done. I love the white frame around it. I love that it kind of all flows and looks beautiful together. Now for the second one, I'm using the frames dies, and this is where you need to pay attention if you have got patterns on your paper. So I wanted to raise this one up with some foam tape, and the nicest, easiest way to do it is to apply your foam tape on the back and then add liquid glue so that you can kind of wiggle it right into the center of your card. I didn't think about the fact that when I put this down that I would need to pay attention to the direction of my flowers, because the center ends up upside down and it's very obvious my flowers are upside down. So I'm going to show you how I take care of that in a minute. Now I'm doing the exact same thing as before, but for this technique, if you are a person that needs continuity and you need the structure, you need the gaps to be the same, this is the easiest way to do it. Take a strip of scrap cardstock that is roughly the size that you want the gaps to be, and then go ahead and use that as a guide in between each and every strip. So I'm laying down a strip, I'm taking my little guide, tucking it right next to that strip that I just glued down, and then gluing the next one right next to the other side of it. And this is how you can get a really awesome gap that is the exact same size between all of your strips. It's super quick, it's super easy, and it costs nothing, because again, you're using up those scraps and making the most of them and using them as a guide. So now I've got this little panel and it's gorgeous, and all the spaces are exactly the same between all of them. So I've got different sized scrap strips, but I've got the same gap between all of them. And you'll see at the end of the video my variations with this sort of gap technique and different size strips. So I go ahead and cut off all that excess foil card and then reveal the gorgeous pattern on the inside. At this point, it was when I realized that my card is now upside down. So like before with the blue card, I'm just going to go ahead and trim that off the card and then create it into a panel, so it'll be like a white on white panel in the end. So if you do this and you have your upside down card, don't be afraid to trim it off and just trim it down slightly, and then that way when you put it on your card, you can just make it like a layer and make it look intentional. So before I go any further, I'm making sure to glue that panel down in the middle of the frame, and that way I don't have it go on the wrong way on my card. So I've got myself some more scraps that are left over from cutting down card panels, and I'm going to go ahead and glue them to the back of this piece of card, because I felt like foam tape would have made it too puffy off the card, because I did pop the frame up on some foam, so I just wanted a little bit of dimension to make it look intentional, like I did intend to make this white on white layer. So I grabbed some scrap card, glued it to the back, and popped it up onto my card base. Now I'm ready for my sentiment. In this case, I'm going to use this Hello die set from Lisa Horton and Spellbinders, and I'm going to do the Hello die, but just use the 2 layers. There's 3 layers to this Hello die, which is gorgeous, but it's slightly smaller than the other die from Paper Rose, and I thought that would fit this slightly smaller panel a lot better. So I've cut myself out the background out of white cardstock and the hello out of the same gold. And I'm going to go ahead and stick that onto the front of the card. And then it has these sub-sentiments with the dies. So I did those as well because that was quick and easy. And I'll just glue that right onto the front of the card and then add some of those little flat back holeless sequins again. Now, if you haven't got dies, or you don't want to use dies, or you don't have layering dies, then this method is definitely for you. Now, I completely forgot to share the papers I used with this next card, but I used this Inky color collection from Paper Rose. It is so stunning. It almost gives you the impression that there might be some gold or metallics in it. So again, I thought it would be really fun to use with holographic card. It would go beautifully with silver, gold, all the sort of metallic colors. Now, to give myself the impression that I have a frame, I've cut myself layers. So I've got that holographic card in a nice thick layer behind my colored paper. And for my strips, I'm going to be a bit more intentional. I'm going to use my scrap of holographic card, trim it down into little strips. And then I picked out my sentiment that I wanted to go on the card, and I'm going to use that holographic card to kind of hold the sentiment. So for one of my strips is going to be slightly fatter. So I've gone ahead and cut this one nice and chunky because this one's going to have the word happy on it. And so I wanted it to be the place where my sentiment is going to start. So all the rest of my strips are nice and small and skinny, and again, I'm just going to vary the size of the ones that I'm putting down. I'm going to vary the size of the gap between them, and then when I'm all done, I'm going to trim off the excess off the sides. When you use the same backing paper as the strips that you're doing on the front of the card, it gives that kind of impression that you've done a frame. So it gives that same sort of look to it. When I put this down onto that holographic panel, it looks like it's got a frame around it, because that holographic card kind of gives that continuity across the board. So I've gone ahead and die cut out my happy out of white cardstock, layered it 3 times. I did put it onto some double-sided sticky tape when I went to die cut it through, so I could just stick them straight down. And as a little tip and trick, if you want to have a nice placement of your word happy, or whatever word you're doing, then stick that first letter down onto your card base where you want it to go, and then take your negative from your die cuts, place it back over the top. You can use a little low tack tape to kind of secure it in place, and then that way all the rest of the letters all line up beautifully and match. Now I wanted to do happy and birthday, but I wanted to keep the birthday nice and simple and small because the happy is nice and bold and big. But in order to stick my birthday down, because it's such a small sentiment, it will kind of fall into that gap where I don't have the holographic card. So to avoid that happening, I'm taking another one of my scrap strips. I'm going to glue it onto the back of that birthday and then trim off the excess, and now I've got that kind of layer so it will lie flat and match the holographic card and not kind of fall through the gap and get a bit hidden. So it's a nice little trick to do if you need to line your die cuts up but you do have layers on top of your card. You can take your scraps and use them to pop up that die cut in order to make it flat and level with the rest of your layers on the card. Now I do apologize if you're getting a bit blinded by all my foil card. I just love using holographic cards. All my holographic card comes from a shop in the UK, and he does ship worldwide. I'll link that down below for you if you want to check them out. And to finish off this card, I'm going to use some flat back iridescent gems from diycrafts, and I'm doing the same method, put down my glue and then use my chopstick and stick them right on. So I love how this one turned out. It's a nice big card. Now this is such a fun and easy technique to do that you can really go to town with ideas. So make sure to play and have fun and use what you've got in your stash. Use whatever dies you've got. If you don't have dies, you can do this without dies altogether, like this card here. Now these are my 2 extra ones that I did. So I have 1/8 of an inch with equal spacing between, and then I have 1/4 inch strips where I varied the distance between them, and again I use those hello dies. But this time I used square layering dies from Hero Arts. So I did the exact same thing as I did with the circles, but this time instead of lining up the middle one in the center, I offset it. So you can see my frame goes skinny to the bottom right and fatter towards the top left. It just gives it a slightly different feel. And on this one, again, I added the foam tape behind that layer on the outside. For this one, I kept all the layers flat, but I did the same thing. I gave a variation to that outlining frame around the edge, and I feel like it just changes it up ever so slightly. And I love how they both look. So really, you can have so much fun just playing around with scraps and cardstock. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial, and I hope you give it a go as well. All my links are down in the description box below for you. Again, Your subscriptions and your likes and your comments are all what keep my channel going. And when you subscribe, it kind of encourages YouTube to carry on pushing my channel throughout all of the YouTube world, which then gets my name out there a bit more, and that keeps this channel going. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great weekend.